Dr. Robert Baer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be able to speak to you and to your audience. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
You're the Vice President, and you're also a founder of the Spiritual Awakenings International. Can you tell us about this organization and how you come to be one of the founders?
I was on the board of directors for another organization with Dr. Yvonne Cason, and we were on there for a little over 6 months or so, and I had kind of like a download, and we were talking one day on the telephone, and I told her, I said, Yvonne, I think we're supposed to be doing something else. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, I think we're supposed to start another organization. A couple days later, she had a download. She's also an experiencer, like I am, with near-death experiences. And we talked on the phone, and she got the same download, but she was given a name, Spiritual Awakenings International. So we talked for a little while, and at my age, I know that if I'm going to do something, I should probably do it sooner than later because I'm in my 70s. So I told her, I said, I think I'm going to go ahead and start the organization, and why don't you join me? She did. We both quit the other organization we were affiliated with. She was president and I was vice president. And we had another lady named Linda Truax who was the secretary. And she resigned around the same time. Actually, she term limited out. And the three of us went ahead and structured Spiritual Awakenings International. And it has been a phenomenal success. We're in 77 countries in just a couple of years. And we offer programs both in English and Espanol. And I think we're going to expand that very shortly too, to include other languages. But it's remarkable. We formed the group as experiencers for experiencers. And some of the presentations we have they're just tremendous. Our sharing circles are tremendous. And I do say this occasionally, but there was a time probably people who talked the way I talk, or maybe some of the other people affiliated with Spiritual Awakenings International, they probably would have burned us to the stake, on the stake, and at some point in time. But we're gathering people from all over the world, and it's been a phenomenal success.
I just want to touch on, you mentioned both you and Yvonne having these downloads. Can you explain what that means?
By saying that we had, or at least I'll speak to myself, having a download, I get these thoughts put in my head, and I've learned to act on them. And this has been something that's happened to me quite frequently since I had my near-death experiences where I passed away and was revived and came back to life. And I've learned to pay attention to them. And that's how Spiritual Awakenings International was founded. And it's really, we talk a lot about what happens in meditation, what we hear in meditation, and we share it with one another, especially at the beginning, and we've just followed our instincts.
I guess on that note, Robert, how did you experience you had more than one, right, your near-death experiences. Can you walk us through both of them and what happened?
First of all, I'd like to tell the audience that I was a policeman for 23 years, and very rigid, very black and white. I retired from that and became I did a variety of things. I was a professor at a university. Um, I was an international business consultant. I was a city manager. I was a tribal administrator for a Native American nation. And every position I had a lot of power. And I'm going to occasionally talk about that and how it affected me with my near-death experience, because it's very relevant. And I think it's something that your audience may have an interest in. But I was at home in 2008, and a friend of mine, a police friend of mine, called from the 1960s. We had worked together. And you know, you got a good friend when you pick up the phone, and you may not have talked to this person for 6 months or a year, but the conversation goes back and it flows really well. You know that you got something special. And we were talking, and he just stopped all of a sudden, and he goes, "Robert, I have to ask you a question." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he goes, "I'd like to know if you're right with the Lord." And I said, "Why are you asking me that?" He says, I feel like I'm compelled to ask you." And I said, "Well, I think so." And so we didn't talk about it anymore. A short time later, my mother had passed away in 2005, and this was in 2008. I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was my mother at the foot of my bed. And she looked beautiful, just like she did when I was a little boy, all in white. And I mean, I don't know how she spoke to me. It might have been telepathically, but she told me that I was going to die and to get my affairs in order. And I was so upset at myself because she disappeared. I was so upset at myself because I thought, why didn't I tell her I loved her? It was so overwhelming. And I was in a pool of sweat. I thought it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I couldn't sleep. Actually, I couldn't sleep for a couple of days. It affected me that much. And I called my father and told him about it. My father was still alive at the time, and of course he wanted to know if she asked about him. And I said no, but I said she looked beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. So a little bit of time passed, and I had a full physical, where you have the treadmill and you have the urine tests and blood tests and all the other stuff. And I passed with flying colors. So, but in the back of my mind, that event, seeing my mother, was always kind of on my mind. And when I got the clean bill of health, I kind of put it aside. But then my friend that had called me on the phone, my police friend, he passed away. He died. And it was a shock to me. I drove down to California, where I live in Oregon, by the way. I drove down to California and took part in his services, and I did part of the eulogy. And met with, it was nice. I saw a lot of my old friends, and the ones that are still left, and his family. And I never told anybody about what the telephone conversation we had. But I was getting ready to go to Arizona, and my son at the time was a high school football, baseball, and basketball coach, and he had what's called a spring break, and it was a time of year where the Major League Baseball teams were having spring training. So I would always try and coordinate some time to go down there and spend time with him and my granddaughters, take them to the ball games, and just have a good time. So it was getting close to that time, and at the foot of my bed one night, it was my friend that died that had been on the telephone. And he looked like he did when we were young. And I thought, this couldn't be. But he talked to me also. And I don't know if it was by words or telepathically, but I understood what he was saying. And he told me that he was going to bring me through the light and he would be there. And before I could say anything, he said, I have to go now. I am going to visit my grandkids down in Sacramento. He just disappeared. Well, the same thing happened where it was all eerie, and I mean, I was in a pool of sweat. I didn't know what to think, but I made some follow-up phone calls, and I found out his grandchildren did live in Sacramento. I did not know that. Well, it came time to go to Arizona, and this was 2009, March in 2009. So I got on the plane, went to Arizona, spent a week with my son and his family. It was very hot there, and I'm from a coastal climate where it's relatively cool, but it was close to 100 degrees during a portion of that week. It was really hot, and I was very uncomfortable. And I didn't think much of it other than it was the changing climate that was getting to me. Plus, I had passed my physical. Kind of put that in the back of my mind that, you know, I'm fine. So it came time to leave, and my son drove me to the airport, dropped me off. We said our goodbyes, and I started to feel really sick. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it home to Oregon. I looked at this TSA line, it was just long, and I thought, how am I going to do this? But I John Wayne'd it. I made it through the TSA line, went off into one of the little markets they have at the airport, bought some aspirins. It's a good thing I did, probably, and I took them. And I went down to the boarding area at the gate, and when it came time we were boarding the airplane, I was on the plane. I was actually putting stuff in the overhead bin, and I dropped dead from a massive heart attack. And I don't remember anything about being on the plane after that. Fortunately, there were a couple of off-duty firemen who were from the Pacific Northwest that were on the plane, and a doctor. And they knew how to work a defibrillator and other things, give me CPR. But I gravitated into the light, and it was just, it was absolutely beautiful. Someone or something was with me. I'd like to think it was my friend, because if he told me he would do something, he would do it. And I went up and I saw colors that don't exist on this earth. It was absolutely phenomenal, and everything was warm, and it was just like nothing mattered. It was all warm, and it's like everybody's just, the feeling is of love, and it's just peace. But I ended up in a situation where I was in front of a higher power, and it was so humbling for me. It still bothers me to even talk about it. After we have this talk here, I probably won't sleep for a couple of days. Every time I have one of these interviews or I'm on a show, this happens, but it was so humbling. I could not look at the higher power. But I was spoken to, and I don't know if it was telepathically or how it was conveyed to me, but I understood what was said. And the words were similar to, what good have you done in your life? And then I realized there were all types of souls, or I don't know how to explain it. It's like an auditorium, but it wasn't an auditorium. Just all over the place. And the next thing I know, to my left, I saw my whole life transpire before me. It was a life review. And it started from the time I was conceived until the time that I died. And it was a very unusual experience because not only could I feel my emotions, but I could feel the emotions of the people that I interacted with. And when you have a lot of power like I had in my life, where you arrest people, you fired them if there was a personnel issue, or you graded their papers, and maybe they didn't pass because of your grade or whatever. I mean, I saw all these things and all the interactions unfold. And it started with me seeing a picture or a scene of my mother and father. And my father was still alive when I was uh, resuscitated and revived. And I was telling him about this. And I said, I saw a picture of you and mom, or I saw a scene of you and mom standing by an old Chevrolet. And I said, I know it's a Chevrolet. As a policeman, we pay attention to cars, especially the job that I had. And he said, well, what color was it? And I said, it was black. And he said, what did your mother have on? And I told him, she had a plaid skirt on and a sweater. And my father left. He went over to another room, and I could hear him going through a box. And he came back with this picture. And it's a picture of him and my mother in front of a Chevrolet. And I said, that's exactly what I saw. He said, are you sure? And I said, yes, that's it. And he goes, that was one of the best days of your mother's life. I said, why is that? And he goes, that's the day she found out she was pregnant with you, and we got married. I said, wait a minute. I said, are you telling me that you got married because she was pregnant with me? He goes, oh, he said, because my mother would never have said that. He goes, don't worry about it. If I just said that, she would have been so mad at me when she was alive. But he said, that's what happened. I said, okay. I was a love child then. He goes, yeah, you were. So anyways, to me, that proved that my life started at conception. But everything played out. Everything. I saw myself, and I've talked about this a few times. I saw myself as a 4 or 5-year-old. I can't remember, somewhere around that age. My family used to go. We're from the Santa Cruz, San Jose area of California, and we would go to San Jose on Saturdays. My parents would do shopping. They go shopping every week, and I was in a store, and I already knew how to play my parents. I knew if I asked my father for something, I'd probably get it, but if I asked my mother, it wasn't going to happen. That's just the way. I grew up in an Irish Catholic household, and so I saw some baseball cards, and I asked my father if I could get those, and my mother happened to hear me ask, and she wanted to know what was going on. And my dad says, "Well, ask your mother." Well, I knew that wasn't going to happen, so I said, "Can I have these baseball cards?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "They're only a nickel," and she goes, "No." So I stole the cards, and I made it all the way home. I got in the bedroom, shut the door. I opened the baseball cards. They were in a wrapper, and there was a stick of hard chewing gum in them. And I just popped that in my mouth, and my mother opens the door, and she goes, "Robert, what have you got there?" And I mean, I lied. I got in trouble. And she called my father, and she says, "This is unacceptable in our household. We're going back to the store," and he owes that man an apology, the store owner. So they loaded me up, took me back to the store, and my mother just kind of went overboard, saying, "This is unacceptable in our household." Put him call the police if you want. We don't care. And I could see I could read the mind of the store owner, because my life review, that's what happens. You could read, you could understand all the perceptions of everybody. And he was trying to say, this is only a 4 or 5-year-old kid. I'm not going to call the police. So finally he said, why don't you just give me a nickel and we'll call it even. Well, my father gave him a nickel, loaded me back in the car, and we went back to the house, and I was grounded for I don't know how long. But I was telling my father this, and he was laughing about it. He says, I remember that. And I said, well, I don't think it was funny. But he said, you did your job as a parent. That had a profound effect on my life, what you did, what you and Mom did. And I just saw all types of stuff happen. I mean, I saw, I was sitting on a side of the road with a friend of mine, and he threw a rock and went through a window of the neighbor's. He took off and left, and I just stayed there, and the neighbor came out, and she said, Robert, you did that. And I said, no, I didn't. And the more I denied it, the more she didn't believe me. Took me to my folks, and I got disciplined for that. But when I saw that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. That was that woman, I'm sure of it. Now, the people that I was interacting with and involved with, that possibly were part of the review, they were able to say things. And that's what made it difficult. I had a situation where there was a young lady that liked me, and the only time I would go out on a date with her was when I had to double date, because my sister was 10 months younger than me. My dad said it was an Irish twin. And if she were to go out, it had to be a double date. And I had to be in the back seat, and she had to be in the front seat. They had their rules. That's fine. So this young lady was really really a nice person. And she came over to see me, and I was working on my car. I was a teenager. And she goes, oh, can you take me to a dance tonight at the Coconut Grove? And I said, well, my friends and I want to go cruising down on Beach Street. And she goes, well, I'd like to go there. And I said, well, no, I'm not going to go. And she goes, well, can I go cruising with you? And I said, we don't want any girls with us. And so she got mad and stormed off. And then she came back later on with a letter. It was sealed in an envelope with my name on it, and she threw it at me. That night, she went with some other friends, and they got in a crash, and she died in the crash. And when it got to that point of my life review, I actually heard a voice say, you never opened my letter. I never did. I already knew what was in there. It was really a sad time, not only in her family's life, but my life to a certain extent too, and also all of our friends, because she wasn't the only one that died in the crash. There were 4 that died in the crash. When I graduated from the academy, I was a California Highway Patrol. I was a Santa Cruz City policeman before that. Then I went to the California Highway Patrol. They paid quite a bit more money at the time. So I went to that organization, graduated from the academy, and they sent me down to the South Los Angeles or Watts area right after the riots. And it was a war zone. It really was. It was just, the tension was just unbelievable between the police and the people that lived in that community, or the people that came in and agitated things. And it was just unbelievable. And when you had blonde hair, I had white hair, blonde hair and blue eyes, you kind of stood out down in that area. And one night I was working with another patrolman, and we made a stop of somebody that we thought was a DUI. He pulled into an alley, and when sometimes in the projects, when you're there during that time period, you'd be out making a stop or whatever, and you look up and you would see rifles pointing at you. It was very intimidating. And one night we made the stop, and I heard some gunshots go off. In fact, my partner and I both heard the gunshots go off. And even the violator, he goes, "Well, somebody's shooting." Thought they were shooting at us. Well, lo and behold, I saw this guy running towards us with a rifle, and I yelled for him to halt. He didn't stop. He kept coming, and I probably could have drew down on him, but my instinct told me not to do it. And he came up, and he told us that he had just been robbed, and he had fired a warning shot. And when I saw this part of my life review, I heard a voice say, "Thank you for not shooting me." I think it was that person. So all my career unfolded, all my home life, going to school. It took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree because I worked full time, and I had a family, and I would take 3 units here or 6 units there, and I finally got through it. Then I went on to graduate school and just kept going, and got promoted. Was shipped in different locations of the state. I was in East LA, San Francisco twice, Oakland twice, Santa Cruz twice, my hometown. Just a variety of things happened. And I growing up in the area I did, I had some really good friends that we all became policemen together. In fact, they're probably the reason I became one. And there was a shooting in 1983 where I was the second unit that responded to it. And my friend worked for another sheriff's department, and he had been shot. And myself and another officer had been shot also. So myself and another guy, we chased the suspect. But I remember looking at my friend that I'd known since we were real young, and his father was a fireman and responded there. And I saw his dad holding him. Really sad. And it was just something that I didn't want to see again, but it's part of my life. And I was telling my father about it. My father got emotional too because he knew everybody. And so all these things played out. I don't want to bore you or your audience with police stories, but I'll just tell one more because this has a human aspect to it. I was working one night and I got called to the scene of an accident, a fatal accident. It was up in the mountain area, and car had gone over the bank, hit a tree, and burst into flames. And so I got called up. I was a shift supervisor at the time, so I went up, started taking pictures, and I noticed the deceased person was laying across the seat with his hands across his chest. And I told the guys, I said, have you ever seen anybody in a burn situation lay like that? Usually they get in a fetal position. We were talking about that. And so I called the sheriff's department. And they responded up there, and I said, I wonder, this might be a crime up here and not a traffic accident. And they said, no, it's a traffic accident. So I said, okay, we'll take it. So we took it. And that night, the coroner was there, and we were talking about contacting the next of kin. So I said, I'll do it. Didn't want to do it, but I said, I'll do it. So I drove to the house where this person had lived, the deceased person had lived, or at least what we thought he had lived. And as I drove up the driveway, I saw the lights come on in the house. And I got out of my patrol car, and as I started to walk up, I heard a woman scream. And I got to the door, and she didn't want to open the door, and I said, I need to talk to you. Yeah. Finally, she opened the door, and she said, you're going to tell me that my son died. And I said, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, is there anybody here that could be with you or help you out? I need to talk to you. And she just broke down. And I held her and got her to sit down and told her what had happened, made arrangements for her to get to where her son's body was, and contacted some other persons to help her. But when I saw that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, thank you for what you did for my mother. It really got to me. And by the way, they did a autopsy on the person. There were bullet slugs in his chest. So it ended up being a homicide. When you see and interact with people in your life review, and you know what they're thinking, and you know what transpired. If you've ever been in a situation where you've been married and you go through a divorce, some of them are pretty nasty. And I was in one of those. And I actually saw like betrayal. But betrayal wasn't just between a man and a wife. I also saw betrayal in the workplace. People that I thought I knew that were my friends, they would say things behind your back, and there's nothing but truth where I was. Nothing but truth. That's all I'm going to say. Nothing but the truth. And I had a really hard time dealing with betrayal when I was revived. But I have a situation where my daughter had a cancer situation, and she had to go to have some surgery, and I hadn't seen her mother for years. And we both showed up at the hospital to be in the waiting room while the surgery was taking place, and this was after I had my near-death experience, and we were sitting in the room, and finally I said, you know something? Our daughter may not survive this, and if she does, it's going to take both of us to help her. So why don't we just forget about the past and just be there for her? And we made an agreement to do that. I said, there's one thing I have to ask you, though, if you don't mind. And I said, you don't have to answer it if you don't want. I told her about what I had seen in my life review about the betrayal part. She admitted to it. Everything I saw happened. Everything. And around this time, I felt something fidgeting off to the right. I'd been focused in on the left because that's where my life review was going off. But over on the right, something was fidgeting. And I had a dog named Scooter that died in 2001. And we were really close. She was absolutely a phenomenal animal. She was a border collie, a great beach dog. She would get frisbees and stuff like that. Just a great friend, and she liked to go just about everywhere with me. I looked over to the right, and there she was. She couldn't come to me. But boy, she was so happy. And I'm going to be very honest. Growing up the way I did and the way that I believed, I in no way ever thought, number one, there would actually be consequences for my actions. And number two, the animals were part of the afterlife. It was so good to see her. Absolutely phenomenal. So I was taken to a hospital, and there was a doctor from Pakistan that worked on me. And he wouldn't let me die. I was revived. I'd been deceased for probably about 45 minutes total from the time I was in the airplane and taken on the ambulance to the hospital. He revived me, and then a short time later, I died again. This time, I had a different experience. This time, I was hovering above the bed in the hospital, watching them work on me, and I was watching everybody panic, and I actually saw the flat line. I saw it. But in another part of the hospital, my belongings had come in on the ambulance, and they were going through my stuff to find out who the hell I was. I stopped paying attention to myself in the emergency room. I was watching them go through my stuff, and they were looking for my insurance cards. Policemen, a lot of policemen, carry two wallets. One has your regular stuff in it. The other, like your social security card and stuff like that. The other has your badge and identification. And I'd stuck my insurance card in my police wallet. It was in a special place. And they were going through my stuff, and I was trying to tell them where it was, and then I realized, they can't hear me. I must be dead. So finally, somebody opens up my wallet, my police wallet, and there's my cards in there. And they said, this guy's a retired police. And around this time, I got revived again. So I was back in the emergency room, and they had worked on me, and I was breathing again and had a heartbeat. I ended up in intensive care for a long time. I had all these machines hooked up to me. I mean, it was just, it was not fun. And I was telling the doctor about, well, he wanted to know if I remembered what I remembered. I told him a little bit, but I did tell him about being in the hospital and watching the people going through my belongings. He goes, wait a minute. Well, he went down and he found the people that were actually there when I came in, brought them to my room, and He said, you tell them what you told me. And I told them, and they said, that's exactly what happened, word for word. I'm saying this for a reason. You'll hear testimony from people who talk about different types of near-death experiences. For example, hovering over your bed in an emergency room, like I did my second time, or the life review. It could be some other type of experience. They're all near-death experiences. I don't know the significance, why some happen and why some don't. But I look at this opportunity to talk to your audience, and it's up to them whether they want to believe me or not. Quite frankly, I've passed that point. I really care. I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. And I look at this situation and those of other people that have spoken, where it's no different than if you were like Marco Polo or Christopher Columbus or Mark Twain. No videos, no photographs, none of that where I was. And our society is so geared on, especially now with videos, even on cell phones and pictures, recording things. Myself or other people that talk about this, we don't have those. But neither did Mark Twain, neither did Christopher Columbus, neither did Marco Polo. They went and they reported what they saw. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I was revived. And I now have had 5,088 additional days of life. I get up every morning. I'm amazed that I have another day. I live on the beach. I live every day like it's my last day. And I hope this will help some people that are hearing this, because what you do in your life matters. I'm convinced of it. And I've gone back and I've felt compelled to apologize to some people for my behavior. I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but for me it does. For them, it's just some of them don't even remember what happened, but I saw it and I tuned into it. And my memory about that is so vivid. It's just something I felt compelled to do. And I don't ever want to be the boss again, ever. I won't. I started to write grants and do things to help organizations like for homeless shelters and disabled veterans, things like that. I still work, but I choose to do that. No more police work, no more managers. I just try to stay out of the limelight and enjoy what time I have left.
Robert Baer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Watch new episodes every Saturday on NTD television at 9 p.m. Eastern Time and on Epic TV at 9:15 p.m.